Les va a aparecer abajo para que si quieran escuchar algún audio en otro idioma lo puedan seleccionar.
Señoras y señores, tengan todos ustedes muy buenas tardes. Queremos darles la bienvenida al cuarto Foro Internacional de Economía Circular, denominado Transición Justa y Descentralizada hacia una Economía Circular. Queremos también anunciarles que este foro cuenta con una interpretación al quechua, al inglés y también tendremos el lenguaje de señas. Es por ello que les pedimos que en la sección vivo de la plataforma virtual del evento elijan la lengua por la cual desean visualizar el foro. Asimismo, hay mayores indicaciones y precisiones en el chat de acceso a la interpretación. Dicho esto, queremos nuevamente reiterarles la bienvenida a este cuarto foro de Economía Circular. Soy Lisel Zárate, especialista de la Dirección General de Educación, Ciudadanía e Información Ambiental del Ministerio del Ambiente, y nuevamente les damos la bienvenida a este cuarto Foro Internacional de Economía Circular. Este evento cabe indicar que se va a realizar a lo largo de esta semana, entre el 22 y 26 de noviembre, y tiene el objetivo de inspirar, dinamizar y articular a los sectores público, privado, academia y sociedad civil en el impulso tan necesario a la transición justa y descentralizada hacia una economía circular en el Perú y en la región de América Latina y el Caribe. Es para nosotros un gusto contar con su presencia en esta nueva edición. Cabe indicar de que este foro es organizado por el Ministerio del Ambiente, el Ministerio de la Producción, el Ministerio de Desarrollo Agrario y Riego y la Unión Europea del Perú. Esta versión del foro tiene un enfoque además colaborativo y de trabajo en equipo, por lo que además se integran nuevas instituciones al equipo de organización del evento. Se han integrado como coorganizadores la cooperación alemana GIZ, está también la Embajada de Suecia en Lima, la Embajada de Dinamarca ante Perú, la Comisión de Promoción del Perú para la Exportación y el Turismo, PROMPerú, la Sociedad Nacional de Industrias, la Coalición de Economía Circular de América Latina y el Caribe y la empresa peruana Simba. También nos acompañan como colaboradores la Embajada de Finlandia, la Fundación Konrad Adenauer, CAS Perú, Hans Seidel Stichuk, a la Asociación de Gremios de Productores Agrarios del Perú y el capítulo de Ingeniería Ambiental y Sanitaria del Consejo Departamental de Lima del Colegio de Ingenieros del Perú. Así que agradecemos a todas estas instituciones organizadoras y coorganizadoras y colaboradoras. Asimismo, queremos agradecer a las autoridades, expositores, moderadores y panelistas que van a participar en este evento. Como lo habíamos dicho ya en el título, los ejes temáticos del foro son transición justa y descentralización. Así, durante el evento se analizará cómo la transición justa podría garantizar una economía circular inclusiva, en tanto que se reconoce a los territorios como sistemas, que se apuesta por el desarrollo territorial y se identifican oportunidades de articulación con el proceso de descentralización, especialmente en su dimensión económica. Durante el foro, además, se profundizará la relación de la economía circular con el desarrollo territorial, las cadenas de valor, los ingresos justos, el empleo decente, los incentivos económicos y el enfoque colaborativo para un cambio sistémico. Para ello, vamos a comunicarles que se van a desarrollar 16 bloques. Son 6 plenarias, 4 mesas redondas, 3 talleres, 2 diálogos y un desafío. Los talleres del día 2 y 4, así como el desafío, requieren de una inscripción previa, así que ustedes ya conocen el enlace de inscripción que lo encuentran en el programa.
First day, and this is something that is on the platform that you will find on the platform, and this is very important for the international speakers. So without further ado, we will tell you that you will have many news, and we will have a virtual exhibit that we invite you to visit. And you know, this will be done through the links that are available on the platform. So we invite you to participate. And if you don't know that, you can get into the chat and then you will have everything at your disposal. We also invite you to know better the program so that you can know everything that is available to you, and therefore to know the state of the art and that everything that we have ahead of us in a fair transition to a circular economy and the various experiences in Peru, the region, and the EU regarding circular economy. So we will start today with 3 segments. Besides the inaugural segment, we will have the plenary, fair transition in a circular economy in Latin America and the Caribbean, and then a dialogue and opportunities and challenges for an inclusive circular economy. This is co-organized with the Circular Economy Forum of Latin America and the Caribbean. Without further ado, we will work on the fourth forum of the circular economy. We have Gaspar Frontini, the ambassador of the EU in Peru, Victor Maru, Minister of Agricultural Development, the Minister of Production, and Mariano Castro Sanchez Moreno, who we welcome today. And we will now start this meeting by inviting Mr. Gaspar Frontini to please give us the welcoming words. Good afternoon and welcome, Ambassador. We are full ears. We're all ears with you. Thank you. Yes, yes, sir. Thank you, Lisel. Good afternoon, everybody. Dear Mr. Victor Raúl Maita, Minister of Agricultural Development, Mr. Jorge Luis Prado, Minister of Production, Mr. Mariano Castor, Vice Minister of Environmental Management, representatives of the Peruvian government and other governments of the region, dear ambassadors and representatives of the EU member states, representatives of the private sector and civil society, dear participants, may you all have a wonderful afternoon. It is for me an honor to welcome you to this 4th session of the International Forum, Fair and Decentralized Transition to a Circular Economy. This event is the result of a joint work that we have done year after year with the Ministry of the Environment, that of the Production and Agricultural Development. As has been said by Lisel in the beginning, there are many players who get together for this same effort this year. Allow me to mention them again: the German cooperation, K and Z, the Swedish embassy, the Danish embassy, the Finnish embassy, the Coalition of Circular Economy of Latin America and the Caribbean, the National Society of Industry from Peru, the Peruvian company Simba, and also the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, CAS, Peru, the Hans Seder Stiftung, the Association of Producers of Peru, and the School of Engineers, the College of Engineers of Peru. I'm telling you this because I believe it is very significant, as it does indeed reflect the interest about circular economy for a diverse public from the state, the private sector, international cooperation, academia, and the citizens at large. As a proof, if we need another, is that there are more than 5,000 participants that have been registering for this forum. As we all know, we are now at a very important gateway for humanity. This is not my conclusion, but the conclusion of the recent scientific report of the Intergovernmental Group of Experts on Climate Change that concluded and that there is a quick warming because of human actions. Of course, we must act urgently, and to do so, it is important to introduce a change in the production and consumption models. The EU has a clear commitment towards climate that can be seen because of an ambitious goal of reducing the gas emissions by 55% in 2030 as a first step towards a total neutrality in 2050. The EU is mobilizing all of its machinery to make sure this happens on the grounds of the European Green Covenant. This is our commitment, and we are convinced that the key to do that is the change of model towards a circular economy, which will not only allow us to change climate change and to stop it, but also to allow for a better equality inside our societies. However, the EU only represents 7% of all of gas emissions throughout the world, and therefore we cannot act alone. We have to call on all nations and all actors to do so. That is why since 2018 we have been working with the political and private sector authorities to move towards a transition from the linear to a circular economy pattern. Every forum on circular economy has allowed us to have a number of processes, among them the sectoral worksheets, and the aquaculture, and the importance of governance for circular economy. This fourth forum takes place on the two main lines: fair transition and decentralization, just transition and decentralization. An inclusive circular economy could guarantee a just transition if we bet on territorial development and decentralization. The vision of the circular economy has evolved. It has moved from a simple environmental ambition model to one that increases the well-being of society by adding the environment, social and economic aspects, and making sure there will be a sustainable development. There is not one single model, no one size fits all. We have to encompass characteristics that are of national systems. Here, the multiculturality and the mega diversity of Peru. From Europe, we are looking for adding Peru towards a just transition and a decentralized transition to get an inclusive circular economy where everybody is present and nobody is left behind. With this goal in mind, we will reinforce our new cooperation program for the period 21-27 with a strong circular transition component. Almost half of our activities in this program will focus on these issues. In this fourth forum, we want to give you the experience acquired in the EU and the lessons learned. Also, we would like to provide information on the actions that we are carrying out to foster systemic changes towards circular economy. For example, the just transition mechanisms, the circular region, the circular value chains, and others. Let's make sure that today's forum becomes another important fact for circular economy. And I wish you all a fantastic debate and very good exchanges. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador Frontini, for these words and that are so positive for the goals that we are after in this fourth International Forum on Circular Economy. We will now hear Mr. Victor Raúl Maica. Good afternoon, all of you, the members, and especially the delegation of the EU. Our colleagues from the Ministry of the Environment and Production who have made it possible to carry out this important meeting. I also greet the team of the Ministry of Agricultural Development because of all of their assistance. The transition towards a circular economy in Peru, and especially in the agricultural movement industry, is very important for creating better and development opportunities for our producers, family producers and others, taking into account the preservation of the environment and the strengthening of food security by moving towards strategies that will optimize in a sustainable fashion both the human and natural resources to have a better agricultural offer that is of quality and sustainable. From BIDAGRI, our organization, we have efforts with the support of the EU for the development of a word that will allow us to work for a more efficient agricultural sector. To do so, our line of work moves towards a number of actions that contribute to improve the commercial trade, the identification of markets for sub-products, the capacity building activities, access to funds, identification of mechanisms for technology transfer, and research. All of this will contribute to improve the well-being of the agricultural producers in our country and to feed our families. Finally, I want to thank again the organizers, and I invite you to actively participate in the activities that have been scheduled in order to inspire and articulate the public sectors and the academia and civil society for a just transition towards a circular economy in both Peru and the region.
Bien, agradecemos la participación en video.
We thank for the participation of Mr. Raúl Malta, the Vice Minister of Agricultural Development. We also want to send you the greetings of Jorge Luis Prado, who cannot be among us, but throughout the forum, he will be participating. We will now listen to Mr. Sanchez Moreno of the environment. Thank you. I want to greet, first of all, the Minister of Agricultural Activities, the Ambassador of the EU in Peru, Mr. Gaspar Frontini, all of the representatives of the different ministries, government officials, and also representatives of other governments and civil society companies, both in Peru and the whole region. As Mr. Frontini very well said, the EU delegation indeed has a very strong participation that would never have been possible in a hotel, the largest one we have here in Lima. It would be impossible to have 5,000 people in this fourth International Forum on Circular Economy. This goes to show that there is a very strong interest in exchanging information and proposals. It is also clear that since the first forum that we organized in 2018, I participated. I was a member only, I was not a speaker, but it was very important. This is the fourth forum, and there is, of course, a big movement along this path. Over these different years and fora, we have been able to see how the companies, consumers, government organizations, and others are identifying opportunities in order to develop circular economy models. but not only to identify them, but also to adopt them and to share experiences. And also, and this is the case with a replica that we have taken on board, that this is a context that is not only of sharing proposals and ideas, but also actual facts. And this is something that you will all be feeling, stemming from this forum that is not only an introduction, but this is something that will show us how these experiences have been brought to light, not only in the region, but also in the EU. Because these experiences will indeed be visible and how we are moving towards a circular economy. It is very clear that this action, this transit towards a circular economy, responds to certain needs and also to a vision that is looking to respond to new challenges and scenarios where we can clearly see what the benefits of such changes are and the need to move towards this new model, and where a greater efficiency in the use of materials and energy sources and so on are there. And that is why we, as we will show, we are all part to this process. And everybody following his or her own role, we must contribute to providing answers to these different challenges. And from the environmental perspective, this is a very important line of work towards change, towards better, best practices, both in production and consumption. The change in model means changing all of these parts at the same time. The typical strategies aimed at providing better environmental and social practices have called on better regulation on the users and users of these resources, and we have to take them on board. The other strategy has been the regulation on the quality of the environment. We have also had the climate goals that are extremely relevant. We have also found processes based on incentives, on market incentives and others, and the circular economy becomes a very important line of work, looking for the integration of the environmental issues, but not only them. We also wish to improve the efficiency of materials, use waste as new materials, move towards renewable sources of energies, improve and enhance the agriculture to find better export possibilities that will be inclusive and decentralized. In the case of the fishing, there are a number of cases where the circular economy has shown to be actually true, a fact of life. And all of this has to do with a self-regulation, which adds another aspect of the circular economy in this process. Now, this context that has to do with very concrete examples is also happening at a regional level, where the coalition of Latin American and Caribbean circular economies with different players and experts, we now have been working for 1 year, and where the exchange becomes of the essence to make sure that we have a learning process and to contribute to the change of model. Now, regarding the Peruvian government, this continues to bet on circular economy. Clearly, the position is very clear, and we can see it in its policies and instruments and tools. And we have said that this process has also come along this forum, on the 3 previous ones and this one. And the forum is a new agenda, a new report on what can be done and what has been done by implementing policies that generates a context that will allow for circular economy to be an actual fact in each and every sector of our different economies, so that each of them can take advantage of whatever is their part: fisheries, agriculture, forestry, and you name it. This is something that we've seen on the roadmap of circular economy in our region. And with this, we will have a strong progress in our sector. And the platform of circular economy recently installed, what it is looking for is, considering the experience and the aspirations of these sectors, is to build this common vision, because this is absolutely of the essence. In order to change the model, we need a common vision to find a common parameter that is valid for all of us when we think about circular economy in our countries. So this forum, which, and this, with this I will finish, this forum of the fair of just transition and decentralized transition is very significant. Why? Because I just want to tell you about 2 recent experiences that we have seen. Recently, Machu Picchu has been declared a tourist destination with a kind of circular economy. In its territory, the people of Machu Picchu has identified what their level of emissions are, the opportunities of changing consumption and production patterns, and on this basis, they have set 2030 to reduce by 45% their emissions. And this changes, of course, the whole reading of with the specific characteristic of the area. Machu Picchu is where Chuquirao is to be found, where there's also a proposal to create a biosphere reserve, which would even lead further to a inclusive and just transition model. And that this has a typical characteristic of a standard economy that moves towards the circular economy, and that is how we believe we will have a just and inclusive transition to all the activities carried out as a potential of the challenge that we have set for ourselves to be overcoming. And therefore, there will be a critical mass that is very important, because you have local efforts, regional efforts, country efforts, and everything fits together. This introduces what we have said before in the prior fora, the territorial and social dimension, and the fact that circular economy has as a final goal the reduction of inequalities. That is why we are really pleased to have such a wide coverage for this forum. And we hope that indeed all of these presentations will be useful to be able to give another replica of the circular economy model elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister Mariano Castro, for addressing us your preliminary remarks and for bringing this great news, which the country always celebrates, such as the denomination of Machu Picchu as the first carbon neutral area in our country, which fosters tourism very deeply. We will now introduce the European Union Ambassador and the Minister of Agricultural Development and Irrigation. And with this, we bring to a close the inauguration of the fourth forum on circular economy and give way to the plenary.
Bien, los saqué del aire, estamos fuera del aire. Bien, ¿estamos listos para comenzar la plenaria?
Sí.
Bien, y ahora sí vamos a iniciar con la plenaria que ha sido...
Very good. We are now going to give way to the plenary, which has been called Fair Transition, Decentralized Transition to an Inclusive Circular Economy in Latin America and the Caribbean, coordinated by the Coalition of Circular Economy in Latin America and the Caribbean. Following the presentations, we will have a Q&A session. So we invite you to share your questions on the forum's platform. By accessing the platform, all you need to do is to type in your names and the question. So with this, it is a pleasure to introduce Mr. David McKinley, the Global Director of the Platform to Accelerate Circular Economy. He will be introducing the fair transition in the Platform Action Plan to Accelerate Circular Economy. David, welcome. All yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today and to share a few ideas and learn from you as well. It's an honor to speak with many dear friends and leaders, including current partners at PACE, the Platform for Accelerating the Circular Economy. PACE was born at the World Economic Forum and is now hosted by the World Resources Institute, where we bring together over 100 CEOs and ministers championing the circular economy globally, including ministers from Peru and the European Union. And working to build a movement across sectors on the circular economy, our focus is on areas that require deep collaboration between businesses, governments, and civil society. And why do we need this? Because the scale of the problem is significant and the scale of the opportunity is worthwhile. More than 1 billion tons of resources enter the economy every year, everything from metals, minerals, and fossil fuels to organic materials from plants and animals. And just 8.6% gets recycled and reused again. And use of resources has tripled since 1970 and could double again by 2050 if business continues as usual. We would need 1.5 Earths to sustainably support our current resource use at scale. And we have to reverse this pattern of take, make, and waste, which is why we will soon be announcing a new ambitious mission to help double global circularity in the coming 10 years. This is an imperfect metric, as it focuses on waste and recovery only. However, it is directionally important and a clear signal of the challenge and commitment. So let's dive a little deeper into what distinguishes a circular economy. Throughout 2020 and 2021, the broader public and leaders have become more aware of the acute weaknesses of public health, often overlooked elements of the economy like supply chains, the movement of people and consumption, the climate crisis, and other pressing issues. And these issues are, in large part, a mandate for systemic change that predates the COVID-19 pandemic, which has existed which has exhibited that our socioeconomic model and our existence are seriously challenged. For the first time in human history, we face the emergence of a single, tightly coupled human and ecological system. We're more interconnected and more interdependent than ever, and our individual and collective responsibility for our future has enormously increased. The Club of Rome nicely summarized this by arguing that we are moving from an empty world dominated by nature to a full world dominated by humans. In the empty world, labor and infrastructure were the limiting factors of human well-being. In the full world, the limiting factors of human well-being are the natural resources and environmental sinks. And we must address the resulting social, economic, and environmental imbalances. Let me give an example of human capital. For example, healthy citizens is in many cases undervalued, and natural capital, such as healthy ecosystems, is not valued at all.
Como no se valora la salud del ecosistema.
Since the market is the main mechanism of our production and consumption decisions, we should not be surprised by the existing imbalances. They're just the logical consequence of the market signals sent to the market players, and in a way prove that markets work. In economic theory, this phenomenon is known as externalities. For example, costs which do exist, which we deny, which we don't account for, and which producers and consumers do not pay for. However, these costs are very real for those who pay them, the individuals impacted, the health systems, and in the majority of cases, the next generation. And we've got to look at the fundamentals underlying our economic system, and I would suggest two principles that must shift. One, sustainable development with a focus on the urgent management of global warming and species loss must be seen as profitable investments into long-term success instead of viewed as a cost. Second, sustainable development based on smart resource management and the new investment and innovation paradigm will determine the businesses and countries' competitiveness. And while economic drivers are critical, various impacts are actually bringing governments and companies to adopt circular economy practices. Circular economy is now widely recognized as a key differentiator in tackling the root causes of climate change, biodiversity, and pollution. And circularity has been seen to have the potential to create millions of green jobs, including many for unskilled or disadvantaged workers in low and middle income countries. So what do we mean when we talk about a just transition towards a circular economy? A just transition can be understood as a set of principles, strategies, and practices that are required to transition workers and their surrounding communities into thriving economies that provide dignified, productive, and ecologically sustainable livelihoods. As a just transition as a principle is essential and is key to our economy's flourishing in the years to come. In the past, numerous significant transitions in our economies were carried out to ensure the survival of a company or economies in and of themselves, leaving behind working populations alone. We must ensure that this time, the shift from a linear economy leaves better conditions for workers around the world. And for the transition to be just, PACE partners like the ILO have identified 4 pillars that become the key towards the decent work agenda. First, a social dialogue. Second, social protection. Third, rights of workers. And fourth, employment. These are indispensable building blocks of sustainable development and must be the center of policies for strong, sustainable, and inclusive growth. And for the transition to be effective and socially inclusive, decent work must be integrated from the beginning, and this is the right time to not only be conscious of these choices, but also thrive and drive towards creating better opportunities. During 2020 and 2021, PACE's partners, including UNIDO, ILO, and many of the teams represented here, developed 5 action agendas with priorities for public-private action. These action agendas are focused on systemic changes in value chains that influence better consumption decisions, design out waste, make the production process efficient, and reuse and recycling friendly, and ensure that the life cycle of products is longer to reduce waste. Across the value chains we work on, decent work and a just transition was identified in the top 10 priorities. So let me provide a few background examples to highlight this issue. In food, productive and regenerative agriculture is estimated to be a $1.4 trillion business opportunity globally, and is expected to create over 60 million jobs by 2030 and 200 million jobs globally by 2050. And Peru has great examples with farms now opting for regenerative agriculture. Skills development programs will be needed for a just intergenerational transition, as job gains will likely be uneven across the value chain. A positive example are the potential gains in bio-waste valorization through local enterprises that engage in the full waste to value chain. To ensure that green jobs become decent jobs and workers' labor standards are lifted, some sustainable agricultural certifications, such as the Regenerative Organic Certificate, include a section on farmer and worker fairness. So let's look at electronics. Global electronic waste generation reached a record high of 53.6 million metric tons in 2019. This is a 21% increase in just 5 years, and worked out to be over 7.3 kilograms of e-waste per person. In 2019, electronic waste generated in Peru amounted to 204,000 metric tons, an increase of 18.6% in comparison to 2019. A shift to more circular electronics will mean more skilled work in the electronic sector, where low-income jobs and losses may occur upstream. For example, new job opportunities are expected to emerge in repair, refurbishment, secondhand markets, and products as a service, especially in countries where the products are used. Additionally, increasing end-of-use collection and recycling is expected to increase jobs in manual sorting and dismantling, as they're more effective in extracting and creating value out of e-waste. What needs to be noted here is the need to ensure that the recycling sector is further formalized and organized to ensure the transition is just, transparent, and accountable. This is also true of plastics and textiles. So let me turn there. In plastics, in line with the recently proposed Global Plastics Reduction Bill by Peru and Rwanda, eliminating unnecessary and problematic plastics will reduce energy use and greenhouse gas emissions related to plastic production. Data from Europe shows the potential benefits and needed investment to get us there. For example, the European Union estimates that making all plastic packaging recyclable and reusable by 2030 could create 200,000 jobs in member countries, but only if recycling capacity was multiplied fourfold. An important factor to consider here is the global redistribution of jobs on the basis of geographic location, type, and mode of recycling. And targeted efforts are needed in skills training, education, and social inclusion to ensure a just transition. Unnecessary and problematic plastics are often not recyclable, so removing them from the waste streams can improve working conditions and value capture of informal workers in collection, transport, and recycling of plastic waste. The final example I'll cover is textiles. Similar to the troubles in recycling mentioned above, the volatility in the job market will depend more on the types of fibers used for the cloth production. Moving to renewable inputs, especially if natural fibers are produced in regenerative ways, can lead to more jobs, as it is more labor intensive. While there may not be a significant job shift in the virgin fiber market, moving towards regenerative farming is better for the health of the farmers present in the longer run, as it reduces exposure to harmful chemicals. Not mentioned earlier, but important there as well, is the gendered nature of the division of labor that exists in these sectors. Therefore, to ensure the quality of jobs offered, skills development programs will need to be sensitive to the differing conditions faced by women and men workers in, for example, repair and resale. And the outcome of the transition in terms of decent work will be dependent on the implementation and monitoring of safer practices and chemicals. So in conclusion, circularity is not the magic solution for climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, or vulnerable economies. However, it is part of the solution for them all. Now the world needs to connect the dots to deliver practical action plans, policy shifts, and execution at scale. We need ambitious circular economy leaders from all sectors to come together and jointly drive action. We need front runners who are ready to move from pilots to full scale. And we need innovative partnerships between public and private actors who are keen on execution. And we need government directions to improve upon and engage and leverage public procurement. And finally, we must ensure that we account for every stakeholder in the process and greater and safer, better opportunities. Again, thank you for having me here today. I look forward to engaging as we move forward.
Bien, muchísimas gracias por la participación del señor
Thank you
David
very much for your involvement, Mr. David McGinty. We will now go on with the rest of our agenda by welcoming Marlena Ahonen, a representative of the Finnish Sitra, and she will be discussing circular economy, just transition towards a new economic model. Good afternoon, Mrs. Ahonen. Over to you.
Muchas gracias. Can I need to
Thank
double
you very
check
much.
my presentation already?
All right.
I'm hoping this is a yes. Oh,
We can,
excellent.
yes.
And very good evening from Helsinki. It's already almost 11 p.m. here. And a warm welcome on my behalf to the 4th International Circular Economy Forum. And well, as mentioned, my name is Marlena Ahonen, and I work in Sitra as a circular economy specialist. And to me, circular economy is the world's best and most inspiring strategy towards a sustainable, meaningful tomorrow, towards which everyone can be basically inspired to be part of building. And indeed, to make the transition fair and just, we really need to have everybody on board the transition. Today, I'm going to share you some thoughts on why circular economy is really a necessity in building a sustainable future, and how, in order to create a circular society, we need a lot more. We need a new set of skills as well as new competence. And what can we do to support the fair transition? And what are the first steps? Well, really briefly on Sitra. We are the Finnish Innovation Fund, published over 50 years ago, and we operate under the Finnish Parliament. We are, it was a gift for all Finnish people celebrating 50th anniversary of Finland's independence, and we're tasked with building and future-proofing Finnish society, which is partly, we cannot focus on Finnish society merely since we're living in a global planet, so that in order we need to have everybody on board. Circular economy is one of Sitra's all-time biggest efforts, since it has huge possibility to decouple economic growth from natural resource uses, as well as make the future operate in a more fair manner. And we have been pushing Finland to become a global forerunner in the circular economy for over 5 years. We have, for example, compiled the first national roadmap to circular economy, as well as built business tools for businesses to move forward towards circular economy, created World Circular Economy Forum, as well as developed circular economy learning materials and courses together with all levels of education. And these are all linked to what we're discussing here today, of how do we enable a fair transition. But before we go there, I want to address why are we doing all of this? Well, even past COVID, there's 3 major crises that threaten the future of our planet. There's depletion of natural resources, we have climate change, as well as biodiversity loss. And actually all of these crises emerge from the way that we use and produce materials and products. So in order to address these global challenges, we must look for a circular economy as one solution base. And well, shifting to a circular economy really calls for fundamental change in the way we produce and use materials, as I mentioned, and this will inevitably bring about new social challenges. In a big picture, when looking at what is the linkage between social sustainability and circular economy, we see that circular economy social impacts are divided to jobs, skills, and equality. So that perhaps the most obviously discussed social impact of circular economy are jobs. When the logic of the economy changes, there will be changes to the aims and means of work. This, in return, will require quite a large new types of skills that allows us to operate in a carbon neutral circular economy. And at the same time, we need to assess the wider impacts on societal equality and well-being, for example, in regions, industries, communities. Circular economy is often seen as a tool for creating work, as I mentioned, more GDP, and thus reducing absolute poverty. As I mentioned on the previous stage, the social aspects of circular economy include decent work, inclusive opportunities, income distribution or redistribution, accessibility of new services, human impacts of healthy environment, global equality, as well as lifelong learning. And these are all necessities to be taken into consideration when we think about a transformation that is such a big as we're discussing with circular economy. So the circular economy is an opportunity to build a fair economy that creates prosperity and benefits for a larger number of people. A fair transition can be assessed by the social impacts of the shift, but how are the benefits and burdens distributed among sectors, regions, and professionals, and who will be involved in planning the transition? These are the big questions that need to be taken into consideration when doing the transition. Well, as I mentioned already in previous slides, with circular economy and the societal changes it brings, we really need to have everybody on board planning to transition. So this is where we started in Finland already in 2016. We invited all the stakeholders, all the key players in a roundtable for discussions to define each and everyone's role in the change. This led that in 2016, Finland was the first country in the world to create a national circular economy roadmap, which is really a tool for change. It helps define the required steps and compiles key stakeholders' views on the essential changes and actions required for the circular transformation. So creating a shared mindset about the path towards a sustainable future is really necessary to ensure that no one is left behind and the transition can be done in a fair and just manner. The roadmap process really offered a way to engage key stakeholders and inspires others to become involved in the transition and define their own means on reaching the new economic model. Well, the roadmap work made it really clear that we all have a role and a right to be a part of building a sustainable future. And in the future, we will all be circular economy specialists and circular economy professionals, regardless of the actual profession. And another important point is that, well, in addition for circular economy to be built together, in order to create a circular economy society, we really need new kind of expertise. And education sector plays an important role in developing the future experts. We know that circular economy skills are needed in all occupations, and we need to make sure that these skills are taught at all levels of education. Each and everyone will need an update on the skill sets to enable the fair transition. To enable this, Citra cooperated with all levels of education to ensure that circular economy thinking reaches as many Finnish people as possible. In years 2017 to 2019, we developed and tested learning materials and courses together with all education levels. This meant altogether 27 projects together with colleges and vocational colleges, universities of applied sciences, universities, and other educational organizations. And most of the developed courses continue as a permanent part of these institutions' activities. And already 2018, Finnish higher education provided the most circular economy related content in the world. And it's not just about creating circular economy courses, but it's about integrating circular economy understanding to what are the students learning today in their everyday studies. So our first target was to reach all levels of education. But what we're working on right now is to bring about the importance of lifelong learning. And the next step for us is to reach those people already in the working life. So how do we ensure that no one is left behind in the transition when jobs will be changed, transformed, or replaced? We already know that new jobs will emerge in circular business models, for example, in sharing economy or product life extension. We know that some jobs will be replaced. Some jobs are most likely to be lost completely, for example, those in the coal industry sector. But we know that many jobs will be transformed to circular. For example, farmers will be put more focus on farming land carbon sequestration as one example. But if we look at this in a way that...
Pero si nos fijamos en esto, para saber cuáles son las cualidades que van a necesitar los nuevos estudiantes y todos los participantes, sabemos que, por ejemplo, lo que tenga que ver con la circularidad de los materiales, desde el diseño hasta el reciclado, las cualidades que están a favor de la circularidad de las infraestructuras, por ejemplo, logística y manejo de infraestructuras, sobre reparación y mantenimiento, y
in sharing economy or secondhand markets. Also need creative skills, for example, design and marketing of circular products and services. So there's a lot of possibilities that will be needed for the future skill sets that don't exist already today. But when we started to build the understanding on how to make the transition and support the new skill set and competence for people who are already in the working life, and as well as in the educational sector, some of the learnings we've gotten along the way, I like to still address this. Oh, my apologies. I jumped one slide. There you go. So some of the learnings we've gotten along the way on how to improve the level of readiness to a fair transition to a circular economy. Well, firstly, circular jobs are created by investing in and scaling up circular economy innovations. That is what we know. And this leads to 2 points on the skills development. Well, as I mentioned already, circular economy know-how must be integrated into all levels and all industries. In addition, lifelong learning and career change opportunities must be made available for workers in companies and industries that are shifting towards a circular economy. And my final words for today are that in a transition that is so big, we really need to create policies, businesses, and structures that leave no one behind. As I started my speech today, circular economy is a necessity in order to build a sustainable future. But to enable the fair circular economy transition, this really needs a new skill set and competence. And that's how we can ensure that no one is left behind and the transition will be fair and just. Thank you, everybody.
Muchísimas gracias a Marlina Ahonen.
Thank you, Marlina Ahonen, and thank you for your presentation from Finland. And now we wish to welcome Jaime del Castillo, who is from Spain, and he will try to answer a very important question: is why a transition towards a circular economy needs a territorial approach. Jaime, welcome. Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening here in Spain, not only in Finland. Sorry for my cough, says the speaker. I will try to answer the following question: what is the purpose of talking about circular economy from a territorial or regional standpoint? Obviously, those who have spoken before me know very well the topic, the challenges, and what circular economy means. And I will try to see why one thinks about a territorial focus, especially for the regions in Latin America, specifically Peru with relatively low development levels that have to cater for many problems of the region. So why should they be concerned about circular economy? Well, there are many things. Besides the commitment with the humankind, with the earth, and the need to reduce the greenhouse effect gases and otherwise, it is also a way of contributing to territorial development and to the enhancement of living conditions for the future. Why? Well, first of all, we are protecting something that is scarce, and these are the natural resources, our own resources, by increasing the recycling index. Because by introducing new production methods that will allow us to reduce the number of plastics, chemicals, and others, we will be able to promote sustainable materials, which very often are proximity materials, as well as renewable energies that can be used everywhere and produced everywhere, where there is sun, wind, wood, vegetables. In other words, a very strong agricultural production capacity. Why? Well, if this is a commitment towards the humankind by reducing the consumption of certain resources or products, especially the waste materials that we are leaving behind, it is clear that from Lima, it is very difficult to carry out the value change, to modify the value change throughout Peru. And from Santiago to the Chilean one, and from Buenos Aires to the Argentine provinces. So the use of the value chain is when you can see how we can maximize the exchange of materials and how they can be recycled through other productive processes, and hence how to contribute to circular economy. On the other hand, if we manage by working on the value chain to improve our own products and reduce imports, especially by enhancing self-sufficiency, we will reduce CO2 emissions because there will be less transportation. On the other hand, when we talk about enhancing processes, it is a way of improving the quality of life, the quality of jobs, of developing an internal market of goods and services, a green sector that is more sustainable. Why? Well, because a person has to get related to the changes in behavior, to the interests of each and every person. That is why if we introduce an accounting that is sustainable, an environmental sustainable accounting, and we see what the impact is of recycling or circular economy when we use scarce resources, we will see that there will be a positive effect for all of the economy and hence for all of the inhabitants. That is much easier to do at a regional or even local level than at a national level. On the other hand, if we want to create warehouses for things like batteries, lights, electronic devices, and have differentiated containers for waste, it is much easier to do that at a regional or local level than at a national. And therefore, besides picking these things up, we can create plants that recycle that. And this for the future is a big challenge, because the development of sustainable mobility will imply the use of models with which, if not recycled, will have a terrible impact on nature. This is case, for example, of renewable energy. We have the problem of the sun cells that are not easy to recycle. If I just pick this up and I do not recycle, I will have a problem in the future. There is also a problem with the accelerated obsolescence of electrical and electronic devices, and also mechanical ones, mind you. There is a new opportunity for business, which is revamping obsolete devices in order to reintroduce them on the market, and hence giving access to the use of these goods that are more sophisticated to some levels of the population which before could not have any access to these goods before because of economic reasons. On the other hand, the population, it is easier to have something at proximity levels when they speak the same language, when they know the problem. And if the young population are not aware of the importance of reducing consumption levels, it will be impossible to introduce the circular economy and therefore a sustainable economy. And finally, I would like to insist on something very important in Latin America and the world, that is the circularity of water. It is a scarce resource, and in many regions of Peru, they know that it's a scarce resource, but at an international level, this has not been so clearly seen. However, it becomes more and more and more difficult to find, so the reduction of losses, of leaks or others, the way the water is used, the management in agriculture where there is an intensive use of dripping or water use for crops and so on. And of course, the fact of reutilization of water, reuse of water. All of this explains the fact that there is a concern by the European Commission on how to make sure that at a regional level, there is also strong participation on sustainability and in particular on circular economy. And to do so, there is a general framework, which are the European policies. There are European funds to do that. There are some tools that is the obligation of the European regions to define operational and programs and strategies for the long term, which leads in turn to a circular economy. To get closer to the ground, I will tell you a concrete case. But before that, I want to tell you that there is an international framework that are the SDGs of the UN that have been taken on board by the EU, and at the European level has become a number of strategies. One of them is of the essence, which goes from 2021 to 2027, and for all practical purposes until 2030, which is the Green Deal. No policy as funded by the EU can not take into account the fact that it must contribute to the Green Deal, to diminish the impact on climate change, on the actions that have to be financed. And when we talk specifically about circular economy, well, the European Commission has its own action plan, which is within the framework of the Green Deal, and that is a guideline for all of the member countries. This is in the case of Spain, has become the Agenda 2030, aligned with the goals of the United Nations and those of the EU. And it then becomes something that is decentralized to the different Spanish regions. They have an important budget. This is in billions of euros, which for different structural funds, they contribute to local development, but in the framework of political goals, where we can see the importance of sustainability as a horizontal transient factor, and one that fights more against climate change. And there we find circular economy. That is why it is important for you to know that, as you can see on item 2 here, the circular economy is part of a much wider context of actions aimed at fighting against climate change and at reducing the environmental impact and the emissions of CO2. In the concrete case of circular economy, the Fund for Regional Development, which is the one that funds the regional policies in Europe, you can see that a number of indicators have been created. The actions that have to be started must respond or must be consistent with the indicators to be in use. That is additional capacity of recycling, investments in selective pickups, use of recycled waste materials as prime goods, as matter, the increase of waste materials that can be used in the industry, which in the case of Castilla and Leon, a region of Spain, becomes a strategy of bioeconomy for the food industry, which in our case is the most important economic sector for employment and development, and the second for GDP. Therefore, this is a sector that turns many products and creates a lot of waste. Hence the importance of circular economy here. And to do so, we have carried out a number of actions. We have a project of Eco-Design Center to make it easier for those products that are going to be produced use less materials, and then that they are easier to recycle. And this center, AEICE, has a contract with the regional economy to create a guideline that will assist everybody to know better what they have to do, especially for construction, furniture, and others. And they have a very important use of raw materials. And then there is the R&D, where there is a transfer of technology, including one on circular economy, and then some specific projects of R&D among the different technological centers. So the bioeconomy strategy that is part of a larger strategy is a good example, showing that there is a circular economy strategy that will bet on research and innovation, because it will take the waste as a resource by promoting new consumption patterns and providing importance to these, so that if the young people are not aware of the importance of that and they don't understand that the resources have to be used and reused and reused, we will never get out. That is why we need training, advocacy, and a number of other factors. As a conclusion, I would say that from this perspective, or being aware of the importance of the territoriality and of promoting circular economy at a territorial, local, and regional level, there will be no way that we can possibly really solve the problem. And we have to push for the regions to act in this field. And this is closely related to the Green Deal of the Commission and with the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. But there is a growing concern about circularity. And with this, I will finish, taking into account that there are concrete cases where the public regional administration betting on circular economy, funneling funds to these, and that will allow us to get closer to another factor that is important for all of the different stakeholders. Thank you for your attention. I hope this will allow us to understand how these concepts that are sometimes abstract and that sometimes they are seen as far away by the citizens, and they don't actually see what the impact is on their lives. When you work on this field, you all of a sudden realize the importance of these factors. It is much easier, therefore, to convey the importance of that to the population and resolving the problems of starting a circular economy activity level in the region. Thank you very much for your participation, Mr. Jaime del Castillo. He is the representative of INCIDITE Spain, and we also want to thank you all from the platform with the question. We will now answer some of the questions that are looking for solutions. We will start the sustain with a question aimed at Mr. David McNty. And the question is, why is it relevant to be part of the platform to accelerate the circular economy, and how can an organization or country join the platform? Thank you, sir.
Sure, thank you. Well, the basic example is that, or reason, is that circular economy is about value chains, and in a global economy, no value chain is purely localized except for things that are made locally, produced or manufactured and used locally. Regarding most of the materials we're talking about, it requires collaboration. The second is that there's rarely a material that's used in one sector. And then when we talk about a transition, you're combining a global or at least a regionalized value chain with cross-sector collaboration, and that requires leadership to move into new areas to lead towards what we call these transformations or systems change. So PACE is a place for CEOs and ministers, a lot of ministers of environment, like the minister from Peru, as well as CEOs in these particular value chains to get together and have informal exchanges and dialogues to complement formal exchanges that happen through multilateral processes or more traditional kind of private sector organizations. And so that's the place and that's the space that we offer as PACE. And so examples of that coming to life are like the Latin America Coalition on the Circular Economy, as well as a coalition in Africa that's hosted now by the AFDB in collaboration with UN Environment Program, the World Economic Forum, and others, where we help provide that space for an open discussion that then leads to local action and commitment. So to join, anyone can message us through our website. It's pacecircular.org, and then we'll start engaging with the various leaders. And if it's not something where PACE fits, then the great thing is we have a large network to direct people to the right place.
Bien, muchísimas gracias. Y a continuación tenemos una consulta para la señora Marlina.
Now we have a question for Marlene. What is the main lesson or the main lessons learned from the transition towards a circular economy in Finland? And what could be taken into account to replicate this experience in the Latin American Caribbean region? Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Lisel. Well, I would, in addition to, David already mentioned the importance of the dialogue. So that would be one key element that I would have mentioned, is to enable dialogue between sectors as well as cross-sectoral collaboration, so that each and every sector can then build their own means of what does circular economy mean for them to be able to participate in creating the action points towards circular economy. Since, for example, the construction sector knows best how does everything work in the whole value chain as a whole. So they know themselves best on how to apply circular economy to the whole construction sector or built environment. But in addition to that, I must add as I mentioned already in my presentation, is the skill set. is that since it's important to understand what does circular economy mean in terms of your own industry, in terms of your own everyday life, in terms of what you're doing in your own job as a lawyer, as a manufacturer, as a teacher, how to support the kids on their understanding on how we need to live within the limits of one planet. And that is already also very important, that we enable the future experts, that they have the right skill sets, so that circular economy is really integrated in all levels of education.
Bien, muy bien. Muchísimas gracias, Marlina.
Thank you very much, Marlina, for this wonderful answer. We now wish to ask Jaime del Castillo, what do you consider the most important challenges for a transition to a circular economy, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean? Sir, you have the floor. Well, I believe that the main challenge is to be aware and to be able to bring this awareness to action. They need to improve the living conditions of populations which sometimes have very low income levels, and many things, in many ways, they are lagging behind. As such, I think that we also have to show solidarity from the most developed areas of one country towards the other ones, or from the developed countries towards undeveloped countries. An important thing would be, for example, working on Amazonia, on the Amazon. And this is because of the extension of the Amazon, and also because they have a number of species and resources that are absolutely unique to the world. And it is also an air reserve and repository. But how can you ask people who are absolutely starving not to use anything if they can get some gold in the river? If they have to go to systems and by burning the woods in order to have some rice for the next year, if they have no support whatsoever, how can they possibly be part of circular economy if their own purpose in life is to make sure they eat the following day? Also, from an agricultural perspective, there are many farmers, because 20 or 30 years ago, there was no circular economy issue, but not for the environment reason, but also for economic reasons. Water was a scarce resources. So in some cases, they have been developing technologies where they have saved water, but in most cases, water is not used wisely, and therefore, you in Peru, in Tacna, you already have problems of access to the groundwater. So with the circular economy conception, it would have been impossible because the water coming down from the mountain cannot be used. Again, how can you use it when there are so many chemicals that can be dangerous for human nature, for fooding? If we have circular economy, maybe this water could end up being profitable. So, well, I would say that it is difficult if you don't understand that, if you do not take measures that are adapted to the needs of the communities that will be affected, and at the same time, circular economy approach is profitable because there are many materials that go wasted, whereas they could be reused positively, so both from an environmental and economic point of view. Thank you, sir, for this answer, and I believe that it is so important that the main lines of this forum are speaking not only about transition towards a circular economy, but also just and decentralized transition, where we will include all of those who are present to move together towards these economic advantages and the protection of common goods like the Amazon and the only planet we have. As has been said, we want to thank all of the panel members, and with this we will close this plenary session. So thank you again for your participation, and we will move with the international high-level dialogue. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you.
Bien, estamos fuera del aire, podemos hablar.
Bien, una vez más, muchísimas gracias a todos.
Once again, welcome. Thank you all for joining us for this fourth International Circular Economy Forum. We will now give way to the second part of the day, which is called the High-Level Dialogue, Opportunities and Challenges for a Decentralized, Just Transition to a Circular Economy. Now we will have national and international guests, and this will be moderated by Ignacio Sanchez, who is the coordinator of the environment for the United Nations. Welcome, and over to you, Ignacio Sanchez. You have the floor. Ignacio Sanchez speaking. Thank you very much, Lizelle. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a great honor to me to be here with you today. From the United Nations Program for the Environment, the UNEP, we have been working on circular economy, and many of the people who will be involved today and on the following days have been involved in our activities. So this is very important to us. I would like to thank you all for your interest in taking part in this high-level dialogue called Opportunities and Challenges for an Inclusive, Just, and Decentralized Circular Economy. At this point, I would like to say something, and that is the fact that we speak of inclusive, fair, and decentralized circular economy. Well, circular economy has become progressively more important over the past few years. More and more countries and sectors and organizations bet on this transition, but it is important for it to be inclusive and fair. We need to take into consideration environmental costs, social costs, economic costs, and first and foremost, that no one be left behind. And it needs to be decentralized. We must take into consideration the specificities of each of the regions, each of the countries, which have their own national specificities and their own local realities as well. And that needs to be taken into consideration for the transition to be inclusive and fair. To this end, today we will have 4 prestigious panelists who will be a part of the panel. And as I said, it is to me a great honor to have the opportunity to discuss with them today. We have with us Rolando Castro, the Vice Minister of Energy and Environmental Quality in the Environment and Energy Environment of Costa Rica, Mr. Mariano Sanchez Moreno, Deputy Minister for Environmental Management in the Ministry of the Environment of Peru, Mr. Javier Naranjo Solano, the Deputy Secretary for the Environment in Chile, and Mr. Sergio Mendoza Aguirre, the Director General of Urban Development in Mexico. Thank you all for being here with us today and for sharing your experience and your vision in this dialogue. So in order to get started, I would like to ask all 4 of the panelists one question. And I suggest we follow the order in which I introduce them to get the replies. I would like to ask them to tell us what the opportunities that the fair, decentralized transition towards a circular economy are. So what are the opportunities it offers in Peru and for the development of Latin America and the Caribbean? So I suggest we get started with Mr. Rolando Castro. Rolando Castro speaking. Good afternoon. I would like to thank the Peruvian government for this invitation and to congratulate you for holding this forum. It is always a great pleasure to have the opportunity to share with our colleagues. To me, the great opportunity we face is the fact that we are currently in an economic recovery period after the COVID crisis. And in the Environment and Energy Ministry of Costa Rica, we have always said that we must have a green recovery, a sustainable recovery, because in general terms, when we end crisis, we tend to want to have shortcuts, but that in the long run has a higher cost. It comes at a higher cost. So we need to benefit from this economic recovery in order to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past and to try and have a transition towards a circular economy that is, of course, sustainable and fair. In the second place, and I think this is common to most countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, we are great suppliers of raw materials for the rest of the world. And as such, we do not add that much value to our products. We are very diverse countries, very rich countries, and we therefore have the opportunity with circular economy. I have some interference. As I was saying, we now have the great opportunity of generating added value products. We can now dream of reaching more demanding markets that reward this and diminish our impact on the environment and on natural resources at the local level. So those are the opportunities that I see, and I will leave it at that so that the rest of the panelists get a chance to answer to the question. Ignacio Sanchez speaking. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister Castro. I will now yield to Deputy Minister Mariano Castro from Peru. Hello. Hi, Ignacio. Thank you very much. Mariano Castro speaking. I would like to echo what Rolando just said. And that is common to us all in the region. And I think it's what depicts us in the face of the world. Circular economy is a great opportunity to generate inclusive content and to decentralize economic recovery in the context of a crisis that we do not yet know how we will overcome, because the crisis has generated pressures of different sorts. But the economy is included there. So the new prices of natural resources and mineral resources, which is our Peruvian reality, are growing. We are living in a certain context right now, and I believe that the mining sector is active with different kinds of implications and different relationships with their economic studies. As such, it should be a factor to relate the different practices to circular economy. So we need to change our practices and to adapt them to circular economy. I think further, aside from diverse territories in our countries, which derive from a factor, which is the pandemic, where local economy is and societies and local economies have seen the need to establish a protection mechanism. That is one of the factors where we have this territorial need, where we can articulate the different economic flows and the requirements with the agricultural activities, the cattle raising activities, fisheries, tourism, and others, where we can effectively, in all orders in our countries, whether we had the Andes, the Andes, or whatever sector it comes from, we need to adapt. So in Cusco, for instance, we are fostering these kinds of measures where at a territorial level, we are currently encouraging the implementation of a second or third generation of processes which follow the Rio 92 agenda, but integrated to an economic transformation, integrated further to a process where we identify the levels of efficiency in terms of the materials used. We identify a certain accountability in how we handle our waste and how we generate new opportunities for revenue and new opportunities for growth, for green growth, that is. In the face of the growing context of environmental sustainability, where the consumer and the economy in general are more and more demanding in terms of the new patterns of consumption, I think this would be a factor which could lead to generating better competitiveness conditions by generating a circular economy. So this is a business opportunity with an economic benefit related to improving the reputation and the company image. The pandemic and the crisis in general have brought about a number of additional risks other than what we already have usually. We have opportunities to benefit from fostering circular economy in the region, in the sense that different companies and businesses can better manage the risks with circular economy. Risks in terms of market opportunities, credits, and others. And lastly, I have a territorial approach that I would like to share with you, which would enable us to have an ecosystemic approach. So it would be political and administrative, but it would also foster an appropriate retribution of our ecosystemic resources in the way we handle our basins and our natural resources when we integrate these processes to our territorial resources. Thank you, Ignacio. Ignacio Sanchez speaking. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister Castro. We will now give the floor to Mr. Sergio Mendoza from Mexico. We seem to have lost Javier Naranjo from Chile. I think he had minor issues which led to his disconnecting. So we hope to have him resume his connection with us soon. Sergio, over to you. Sergio Mendoza speaking. Thank you very much. And thank you to the Peruvian government for having us and for organizing this event. To us, the opportunity of sharing this afternoon with you is very valuable. And if you will allow, I would like to begin my answer to your question by saying we need to stress the fact that Latin America and the Caribbean has been a region which has traditionally been characteristic given its inequalities. And we see inequalities everywhere with jobs that are not necessarily well paid and a lack of technical skills, which was also characteristic of these countries in the region. So it all adds up to generate a great issue for the region and for each of its countries. By this, I mean the urbanization patterns that have fragmented the urban and the rural sectors. And in the logic of discussing a just transition, I think we need to have a territorial approach and see how from the production and consumption patterns framework, we have differentiated within the linear economy model the different players some of which were favored. So I think circular economy in this sense is a new model that leads the way to the generation of new jobs. It also allows for a better use of the technical knowledge and the resources, the human resources we have, to lead to a better value chain where those who could have been left out could now be included. So I think we should underscore the different opportunities we see given the economic aspects. So I think this could be related to the creation of new businesses, the increase in the competitiveness of the companies which within its principles adopt circular strategies. The creation of new, better jobs will be demanded based on economic growth. And I think that is one of the opportunities we need to pay attention to. Because although economic activities that were traditionally underprivileged will be undertaken, such as the revaluing of waste, and the most iconic case of this has been recycling over the past few years. But I think that adding value to waste in general is something that hasn't been considered or privileged in some other countries, such as the case of Mexico. So from the economic viewpoint and from the position of a territorial approach, scale economies and localization will be much of what we will see. So in that sense, we will see the clustering of companies, the strengthening of strategies between companies, a productive chain creation, which will ultimately lead to there being greater trust for investors, greater access for investments, with the social accountability and environmental sustainability added values. So when we see this, we need to think of the environment, and I'd already said that before, but I would also like to stress the opportunity we have here with moving forward to a point where countries will have more tools to guarantee a healthy environment. Although it is true that we have been called upon to work on guaranteeing all these factors for the population in our countries and our cities, and we must guarantee a healthy environment, we must also work on our climate agenda. And I think the two are very closely related. We need to work on reducing the emission of greenhouse gases, the exhaustion of our resources, and the environmental deterioration that linear economy has brought about are great factors in this, and society has a great role to play in order to shift the situation. So if we can use the opportunity of awareness raising with the society, and if we can enroll the society in a participatory dynamic in our social processes, I think the result of the transition will be much better. And without a doubt, the maximum opportunities of social development that we will have is reducing inequalities in our cities and territories, which will ultimately enable us to have a better social inclusion by developing mechanisms to integrate local talent. I think some of what strikes me the most in this sense is what we have seen socially, and which could generate as a benefit the fact that those that have been left behind may now find a new opportunity, very valuable for them all and for all of our countries, in integrating themselves to the new economic model. That's the end of my comment. Thank you very much. Ignacio Sanchez speaking. Thank you very much, Mr. Mendoza. I'm glad to see, and this is something I might have said at first, but in this case, three, and should Mr. Javier join us from Chile as well, there will be four, but these are all countries that are members of the Circular Economy Coalition for Latin America and the Caribbean. And the messages that you have conveyed in terms of opportunities reflect and are in line with the vision that we have as a common vision for circular economy that we are currently putting together. This vision further reflects some of the opportunities that you have stated. By way of summary, I would like to insist on some of your key messages, which are the economic reactivation and not repeating the mistakes from the past. This is a great opportunity we have with this transition to a circular economy. Then the added value, which is something of great importance when we consider the fact that we are one of the regions to add less value as compared to other regions and as compared to the level of impact. Latin America and the Caribbean is one of the regions with the highest biodiversity loss indexes given our action on natural resources. All that with having an added value that is much lower to that of other regions. So that is one more opportunity there. And then we have competitiveness and the economic benefit that we can see that can accelerate the trust of investors and that can reduce the risk. Working on territoriality, as you were saying, could also help shorten our value chains, which is one of the great lessons we have learned with the pandemic. We have seen value chains shortened with the pandemic. And I think working at the local level, circular economy can help us be more independent from value and supply chains that are global in their nature and that could therefore be interrupted by different phenomena such as the pandemic. Now, I would like to turn the question around. And since I asked you about opportunities, I would like you to discuss what the challenges are. What challenges do you see in Latin America and in the Caribbean? And if you wish to provide us with some specific examples from each of your countries on this transition, which is just an inclusive to circular economy, then you can go ahead and do it. Once again, we will start with Deputy Minister Rolando Castro. Rolando Castro speaking. Well, I think the challenges are many. First and foremost, I think when you try to change a way of thinking and a way of doing things, one of the challenges is that we need some resistance. This has always been done this way. What will we change? This is the way my father and my grandfather used to do it. I will do it the way they did it. And I think that, to me, is a mental barrier, but it is part of the challenges we have to face. Secondly, although some markets are willing to recognize this kind of products, and it could even be the case that these products, these added value products, have a higher value. So although some markets are willing to recognize them, they aren't always the majority, or not yet in any case, and therefore we could be thinking of a reduced number of players. But in the face of certain economic realities, such as pandemics, these kinds of goods could be those that are not priorities. So generating those kinds of markets and the linkages that we need to generate, that is, I think, the great challenge we face. You were just discussing the coalition, and I think, in part, the coalition was created to overcome some of these challenges by thinking and acting as a region. I think that is part of what is key about the coalition. If we do it as a region, then we will be able to reach greater markets and even go as far as creating and generating a market for those added value products ourselves, products that stem from this new circular economy and that will be consumed in our own region. As Sergio was saying, sometimes opportunities are not the same for all, but there's also consumers with a certain purchasing power in our region who could be willing to consume this. Another great challenge, I think, is that if circular economy is the norm and not the exception, there will also be losers, people who used to be suppliers of materials. And should they not find their new place in circular economy, they could be left out. And they could even lead to some unemployment if they do not join in the new current from the beginning. So I think what matters is for it to be an inclusive economy, which leaves no one behind, as we were saying, so as not to have any losers or to have as few as possible, or that the process should foresee including them so that it wouldn't generate unemployment or economic situations that we wouldn't want in any reactivation process. That is but a few of the challenges that come to mind. I'm sure my colleagues will have other ideas. Ignacio Sanchez speaking. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister Castro. We will now give the floor to Deputy Minister Mariano Castro. Mariano Castro speaking. Thank you. Indeed, when we think of challenges, we can consider quite a few. They will vary according to the sector, to the economic activity within each sector, and depending on its territorial location, which is very diverse. But in general, if we consider it as an aggregate matter, I think the main big challenge is to see how circular economy contributes to the reduction of inequality, or to remember the number one purpose, which would be the eradication of poverty. That would be the main challenge. So when public policymakers wonder how to reduce poverty, they tend to first think of social programs. But that actually contributes to an unequal reduction of poverty. Public policies such as circular economy, when they're well oriented, will yield better results, as will the environmental policy. According to the analysis that has been applied by the World Bank in several countries in the region and some Asian countries and elsewhere, we see about 4% of the GDP that is affected by these sorts of resources, not considering natural disasters, which could account for a further 4% reduction of GDP. But if we understand that circular economy is not merely our environmental policy, then we can indeed introduce the challenge of having a circular economy with a number of components, as it does have, and they will be dealt with over the forum. But that could lead to the eradication and the reduction of poverty. A second important challenge is the fact that our country is one more, and we are very informal here. Our economy is very informal with linear economy, but informality, it's still very present, as elsewhere. Of course, we're not the only ones, but we understand, what we understand by informal is that we have a lot of off the books economic activity. You understand what I mean by that? Lots of unregistered activity. So introducing changes of models in medium-sized and big companies and in the economic sectors where we have more formality is not simple either. So we need to have a change in terms of people's mindsets. As Rolando was saying, then we will have to confront them. They will ask, why change now? Why I am third to do this? And that is when we see the importance of the sustainability context. we foresee opportunities, it gets adopted and replicated, and based on evidence, people will buy in. But informality, I think, is a huge challenge. So for our circular economy roadmaps with the industry, agriculture, fisheries, and the forestry sectors, we see that we can contribute to there being more activity in the different economic sectors and a better recognition of rights, social, labor, and others, and that will consequently include the element which is the title of the forum, which is just transition. Together with informality, but in another dimension, comes illegal economy, which is illegal economic transactions, which are a serious threat to any public policy, not just the environment, but we have tree felling, fisheries, all sorts of illegal activities, poaching activities in forbidden areas or resources that we have forbidden to be used. And that is a multi-sector challenge as it threatens our fundamental objectives in any public policy, besides generating corruption and entering into politics itself. And then I think in the fourth place, and I will end with this, there will be many other factors, but one would be the capacity building from the government, which will involve training, upskilling, considering it part of the management of public policies processes, and generating capabilities so that people can foster the circular economy in the state, in each of the sectors and each of the territories.
And also capacity building in all sectors of economy. That is a topic that means introducing curricula in the technical institutes, in the universities, and so on and so forth. And this has to become a priority B, because any model, if it doesn't have a capacity acknowledging local conditions to foster its own policies for the territories and for the organizations, and also considering, of course, the examples of other countries of the world, it will not work. And we are talking also about capacity building in follow-up, monitoring the follow-up. This is of the essence to measure if indeed there's no momentum of the development of the country is or is not functioning, or what should be adjusted to improve it. Because we always have to know whether we are on the right track. That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Minister Castro, for identifying these challenges and also some of the priorities. We will now listen to Mr. Mendoza from Mexico. I'm sure he can also give us his vision from the challenges perspective. Yes, thank you very much. I would like to talk about something that has already been pointed out, and that is the way we understand how people get an awareness, because although it is true that circular economy talks about habits that we have to change and also the production patterns, if we do not understand, if there is no rationale that we bring on board, we will never be able to finish the circular economy pattern. That's why awareness is so important. But to do that, we need a clear language, a very clear basis of rationale to make sure we find a possibility of opening a dialogue, a common dialogue, which in turn will allow us to bring on board more and more players. Those are the ones that will making sure there will be a transition that works. Therefore, one of the topics that I would like to underscore in the case of Mexico, although it may be not valid for all countries, when we focus on waste and waste management and their reuse as raw material, maybe one of the problems we face is still a not proper management of waste. In the case of Mexico, it's the local governments that do that. If we don't do that, obviously, the circular economy goals for reusing the waste as raw material will not be met. So from a regional perspective, we are talking about close to 500 tons of waste per day. Therefore, we are already at 90% of collection, but we have not yet managed for a proper separation. We still have some difficulties as a region, and not only as a country, to face that. Another challenge that I'm sure we will have is how to package properly investments and incentives, both for the technological transition and the installation of infrastructure. All of the companies that will be participating will have to face this kind of cost. And we have to make sure that we get the necessary incentives for this transition to be a reality. At the same time, I consider that one of the additional elements to be taken into account is that when companies are brought on board, there is enough trust in new companies. Although it is true that there are already some companies that have been consolidated, I'm sure there are other ones that are just beginning. They are just getting onto a market where they want to provide new products and services. Now, this trust must be organized so as we make sure this circle is closed. Another challenge that we have in Mexico is the formalization of economic activities. When we talk about informality, as mentioned by the Peruvian minister, we have an essentially informal economy. Now, within the waste management issue that has been taken from the circular economy, we have many informal workers. And obviously, there is an economy that is strong, sturdy, where there are resources of which many families depend, but these families are informal. That, again, is a big challenge. And finally, we need to be able to have a harmonization of the legal framework. There are many laws in Mexico, yes, that are pointing towards a circular economy. Therefore, it is important to make sure that we have a harmonization so that we make sure these instruments, these legal framework instruments are actually put to work. So thank you again for allowing me to speak. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mendoza. Very interesting. The vision and the challenges that have been identified by the three panel members. I think that the issue of connecting the resistance to change and the social and entrepreneurial awareness is very important because of the resistance to change. This is not only important, and I fully agree that it is one of the main challenges, as Mr. Castro was saying, it is important to work as a region, as a common market, because circular economy has among its many challenges the trade between waste, raw materials throughout the region. And of course, this brings about treaties and the policies that have to foster the import and export of raw materials or reprocessed materials. You have also mentioned the topic of informality and illegal economy. Obviously, the illegal economy is very dangerous. It damages because there are many extraction industries and there are always companies that are illegal. And it's important to see how we can fight against that and how we bring this informality into formality. I would also like to underscore the need for monitoring and follow-up. Indeed, I believe it's a big challenge to be able to measure. I think a lot of progress has been made together with the ISO and others that are having a standard about the circular economy that will tell us how to develop indicators that will allow us to measure circular economy. And of course, the legal framework that was mentioned by Mr. Mendoza, again, that is very important because it calls for harmonization. Otherwise, we are working in silos within public policies instead of opening up the game. The third question that I'm posing to you is this. We all understand what is our present day situation and how this has been caused by a linear economy and consumption patterns, and that we need to have a transition towards circular economy. But we see that there is a divide, so to speak. This was also mentioned because of the investments and funding. How can we overcome this divide? How can we move from linear to circular economy? What are the strategies, tools, initiatives do you believe, maybe some of them are already being introduced, that can be interesting for all of the region? So I would like to see this distinction. If you can make a distinction between certain initiatives which are already working at a national level, and how can we at a regional level overcome the divide and move towards circular economy? We can keep the same order. First, Mr. Castro. Thank you, Ignacio. Well, I think that a first step is a clear public policy, long-term public policy. We are working right now to generate our own circular economy strategy because it will give us a long-term vision where we want to go to then follow the path that we need to follow. We do have some public policy elements that can be helpful. For example, we have a decarbonization national plan. We have a policy of sustainable production and consumption, and a strategy in the field of bioeconomy that aims at improving the conditions of local populations, especially to better take advantage of the biodiversity in their territories. Now, I think it is important to sustain that policy. Then, often, once we have this clear north, we have to make the regulatory elements into account, which very often promote exactly the opposite. That's why once we have an idea of where we want to go, to turn the necessary economic and legal instruments, because sometimes you have some incentives that are negative for our purpose, that can procrastinate circular economy achievement. And that promote a traditional economy instead. And I believe this will be of the essence when we can count on the proper incentives. Likewise, I think we should add local governments, i.e. municipalities and others. 2 months ago, we launched a manual for local governments and municipalities to train them in circular economy, and for them to be the ones in their territories who foster a circular economy henceforth. It was very well received, and it is a product that has been shared with some other countries as well in the region. And I think this can be extremely helpful. These are some of the strategies that can be helpful. Now that Sergio was mentioning the integrated waste management issue, I think it is very important to bring the private sector on board by making them responsible. It is not an issue that is incumbent only to the central governments, but it's something that also pertains to the companies that are manufacturing some of these products, that puts them on the market or imports them, who very often are rather interested in selling the products and making a profit, and without being responsible. More than 10 years ago, we introduced something that has been introduced elsewhere, that is the extended responsibility of the producer. That is the principle of moving that responsibility over, so that people cannot think only about planned obsolescence or only about selling products that will be wasted very often, when they have to be responsible at the end of their lifestyle. So the strategy of design can change. We have to make products that can be used in a circular economy, or to reuse some of them that are obsolete, because what people ultimately want is a good or a service that takes on board all of the packaging that comes with it. So this is a strategy that has been successful, especially for electronic waste, or like pesticides or tires of the cars, or lubricants, oils. These are products that are very difficult to manage, and those who know the products are the manufacturers, and they are the ones that have to be accountable. Thank you very much, Mr. Castro. We now give the floor to Mr. Mariano Castro. Thank you. I would like to start with Rolando's last idea, which is the question of principles that have an impact on policies and strategies. Example, how can we generate principles that will orient policies? What we just heard is exactly something that triggers circular economy in different sectors. That is a fundamental strategy, but of course, it is just the beginning of any strategy. But we have to make sure that we make sure there are opportunity spaces to make sure that these principles can be upheld throughout the value chain, up to the consumers. And that this can be shown, it can be shown that there is a concrete contact in the social improvement. The other strategy talks about the integration in competitiveness, policies. These tough policies. And we also have to think about an exchange, in my case, from the state. I think that it is essential that what the state does for society to be carried out also be done by the state itself. Because when we link that to the social and territorial aspect, which is decentralized, that is part of this forum, we must make sure that the policies are also moved toward the administration, for example, public procurement. So much so that public procurement, local public procurement, also foster decentralized circular economy. That this can be different kinds of sectors, that is the agricultural, fisheries, forestry, manufacturing, and so on and so forth. Why? Well, because if we do that, we would be giving a more visible element when we assign resources and generating a sustainable demand in the various options at stake. And the states of our countries are important buyers. Going back, for example, to the first goal of these SDGs, which is to eliminate poverty, especially now affected by the pandemic. All of the social programs aimed at eliminating malnutrition, improving social conditions, schools, education, and so on. We are spending loads of money to offset these lacks. That's where we must develop strategies to take advantage of local resources with a circular economy component. And also, as was the case in the heights of Cusco, for the recovery of biodiversity species that have been lost over time, quinoa, potato, and so on, because these have been lost, and there is a direct circular economy factor when we say we want to eliminate pesticides and others. I think that to finish, we can examine all of these principles and strategies, of course, that is important, but they always have to be moving like in a lift, going up and down, up and down, up and down. Constantly. The lift never stops. It goes up, looks at the important aspect, goes back, lands on the territory, goes back and fetches and so on, because it is of the essence that we have information, policies, management, resources, controls, and so on. But we also need a self-regulating process. And this is an essential component of circular economy processes. However, these are impossible to separate. And in this process of self-regulation, lift and institutional aspects, not only the environment, but all of them, both at the local and decentralized level, that is where we have to provide incentives, concrete incentives. Those incentives are in the field of public procurement or elimination of subsidies, but these are the incentives, administrative, honor, but also fiscal policies and so on, tax policies. And our experience show that there is a general vision on the one hand. There is a platform built by the public, private, and academic societies. there is a sectoral roadmap built by the actors themselves with timelines, with green production, where the companies will underwrite, some agreements and prepare for the next step. Also in the field of tourism. And to acknowledge the effort that the add up of the benefits of this process is taken on board. These are some of the strategies and some of the things that are that make sure that what happens with the communities, the local authorities from a territorial standpoint, with the strategies linked to the national contributions and so on. That's all, Ignacio. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Castro. I give now the floor to Mr. Mendoza. Thank you, Ignacio. Well, I would start by talking as a strategy. We would also always have to use a dialogue. Dialogue and planning. Both will allow us to get to good consensus and to move towards the goals that we are setting for ourselves. And to do so, I think that one of the most elemental things is communication. And I'm not talking about social communication, mind you, but communication between the actors. And now, talking about social communication, we have to disseminate. We need transparency so that in this stage, everybody feels at ease with these communication, for nobody to be surprised. This, together with education, both formal and informal. When I talk about formal, we're talking public institutions or other teaching systems, and informal, for example, the social media or other types where you are also educating the population. This is one of the things that are very important for us as strategies. Linked to the topic of education, we find the topics of research and innovation, because it is very important that the DNA of circular economy is innovation. Innovation. That is why that is so important, because we should be placing a lot of emphasis on working on the development of innovation. Why? Well, because circular economy has to move from design and redesign of products on the one hand, and to the recircularity by means of reutilization of waste. This is part of the things that we believe are extremely important as strategies. Then something that Mexico has not done, at least not a lot, and which is of the essence to achieve this step, is the extended responsibility of the producer. The companies have to have an extended responsibility so that countries can force companies to comply with these commitments, not only on a voluntary basis. That is why it is so important for the information to be there, so that awareness is one of the shapes that it takes. Not only the obligation, but the self-regulation that will lead these companies to be accountable. Another thing that I consider extremely important as a strategy is the definition of goals per sector, and whenever possible to split the different elements, because it was very important to say what the benchmarks are, and then to be able to follow each of them one by one. I said it before, our strategy will be the package of incentives, and this has been mentioned before. So I will not stop there, but I do wish to talk to the search, the quest, so to speak, of accessible, affordable credits to make sure there is a transition towards new models, and also transition models for different levels and for different entrepreneurial context, not to move from level 1 to 10, but then to now level 2 to level 3 and so on. We cannot expect to move from 1 to 10 seamless, because it is impossible. It is a quantic jump. But if we manage to do that on a gradual step-by-step ways, I'm sure we will be able to get more goals solved. In Mexico, we have found some key sectors, and I believe this is very important to define on which sectors you can base your strategy. Where can you place the necessary platform to make sure that the transit is there, and that these are the engines that will pull the other ones? Because we agree that there are some sectors that are much more developed than others, and they will call for a network of companies to make sure that the transition is achieved. We're talking about the steel industry, cardboard, paper, and many others. These are the companies that will be pulling, they will be the locomotives. And finally, I would like to underscore something that I have said before. As a strategy, that is take on board the advantages of other countries that are one step ahead, and assist those of us that are just starting to transition. Why? Because we will be in a position to work as a region for a common good, a common goal in this market of circular economy that we will find very soon. And with this, I finalize to thank you very much for your attention, Ignacio. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mendoza. It is very interesting. We want to thank all three of you for all the ideas that you have explained, and also to recap, because I think it is important, and you have given wonderful and very clear examples of how you are advancing in your own countries.
I would like to stress to have the need of a public policy to define this north, which is paramount, I would say. And I believe in your countries you already have or are working on developing roadmaps for circular economy. In the region, the Circular Economy Coalition is also at work on defining a common regional vision that can also help us define a common north. And then I would also like to stress the principles that you discussed and instruments such as the producer's responsibility and other instruments as sustainable public procurement. We need to take into consideration that in the region's countries, public expenditure represents 10 to 15% of total expenditure in the country. So both local and national governments are the big buyers. And as Deputy Minister Mariano Castro was saying, they can precisely send that clear message of a transition towards circular economy. That also has to do with other subsidies or concrete recognitions that can be implemented. And I would also like to stress what was said in terms of the importance of education, innovation, because those are the factors that will foster the implementation of these new models and the transition to circular economy. To that, I would like to add one more thing, and it is something we need to continue to work on as we transition to a circular economy. It's related to what we were saying before about trade. I will repeat it because I think it is very important to work on strategies and initiatives that allow us to encourage that common regional trade of products and goods that are circular. I would like to relate that to what Mr. Mendoza was saying about other countries' experiences. This forum is sponsored by the European Union itself, which is a great example, and the EU has supported all these exercises of experience sharing over the past few years. And so that gives us the possibility of working how that common market is working with circular products and goods. In Latin America and the Caribbean, I think we can begin to incorporate those lessons learned in order to foster circular economy and its implementation. Finally, I would also like to make an announcement for a minute, and that is the fact that the Circular Economy Coalition, which Mexico, Peru, and Costa Rica are a part of, together with 13 other countries in the region, would like to call upon all countries in the region to invite them to join the Circular Economy Coalition. We would also like to call upon other institutions in the private sector, in the academia, and the civil society to join us. All informations are available on the coalition's website and on our media. So the website is coaliciondeeconomiacircular.org. On it, you will find all the information. And then we also have focal persons within your ministries who can share more information with you. I thank Deputy Minister Rolando Castro, Deputy Minister Mariano Castro, and Director Sergio Mendoza very much for sharing their experiences and their knowledge on this subject. I would also like to thank you all for having joined us for this exchange. This is the first of 4 days of our forum. The first of 5, we have 4 more days. I'm sure Lisel will tell us more about it, but I have been going over the agenda, and let me tell you, the forum will be very important. I hope we can all continue to learn about circular economy together. Thank you. Lisel Zárate speaking. Thank you very much, Ignacio Sanchez, for having moderated the panel. Now we will yield to Deputy Minister Mariano Castro for a minute so that he can make his conclusion on the block. Mariano Castro speaking. Yeah, it's not so much a conclusion, it's actually more a minute to reinforce the message on the Circular Economy Coalition, which is built with the view to having a common view for and from Latin America and the Caribbean, which is a taster of what we can do from the region and to show you what is being done in Europe itself. So we share best practices there. So I wanted to thank the European Union for their cooperation with us, as well as the whole team in the Ministry of the Environment and all those involved in organizing this activity. I didn't do it at first, and I wouldn't want you to think I do not appreciate all that has been done. So thank you to all the team who are working with us all these days. Thank you. Lisel Zárate speaking. Thank you, Deputy Minister Mariano Castro. This brings us to the end of today's agenda. We will now adjourn this first day of the 4th Circular Economy Forum. It has been said, but once again, we thank all presenters, panelists, and moderators of today, as well as the interpreters and the team of organizers who have done a great job to connect us with the audience who has joined us for today's transmission, for today's streaming. We hope you will have written down information on this process of just decentralized transition towards an inclusive circular economy, and the hope that you will join us. The forum will go on until Thursday, November 26th. Tomorrow, we will discuss something which is very important, and that is the relationship between circular economy and territorial development, as well as decentralization. We would like to invite you to take part of dialogues, panels, exchanges, and the virtual exhibition, which is permanently available on the forum's platform. You have the address to it on the chat. All details on our agenda are also available on that platform. Finally, our interventions for today are being recorded and will be available on the YouTube channel and on the Facebook accounts of the forum's organizers. See you back here tomorrow, minutes before 10 a.m. We will be looking forward to meeting you once again. Thank you. Have a good afternoon or good evening. Thank you. Bye.
Muchas gracias, Ignacio.
Gracias, señor viceministro. Mucho gusto en verlo.
Gracias, buenas
Bien.
tardes.